Good afternoon, and welcome to the District Sechelt Committee of the Whole meeting for Wednesday, May 12th, 2021. It is 3 p.m. We have an agenda in front of us. Are there any errors? Additions or deletions to the agenda? Seeing none, I'd look for a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And we have a number of delegations today. Our first delegation up is Betty Baxter and Pat Feindel. They're consultants working on the Poverty Reduction Strategy Development Program. And I will turn it over to Betty and Pat.
Thank you, Darnelda. I'm going to sort of handle the bulk of things here and refer to Pat if I have to for some questions or some backup. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to give you an update. The project started last fall, really get to work about the end of October, and is due to report June 30th. So what we were asked to do was basically find a picture of what poverty looks like on the Sunshine Coast, look at what opportunities and resources might be to address that picture, and then identify strategies and specific actions. So we're here to bring you an update where we're at before we move into the final 5 weeks of preparing the final report. So what we were asked to do, what does poverty look like? I hope all the councillors have been able to see the slideshow from our forum because that gives the stats, and I won't repeat those, but basically we got stories from people living in poverty, and we talked to a number of service providers to understand what the situation was, what were the deficits for service, and we also talked to the folks working on housing, particularly Cover the Coast, and some of the housing projects that they were trying to pull together. How we did that? We've been working with an advisory committee. We collected data from a large number of reports that have been done on poverty, and we certainly found that our community was a bit fatigued with surveying what's happening with some of these crisis points. And so we took those stats, generally from 2016, right up to a number of documents from 2020. So we're pretty accurate in terms of the recent past, but still great changes in the last 12 months for sure. One of the things we were first asked as we talked to folks about that picture of poverty was, could we address the fragmentation? People working in silos, not knowing what was happening on food security for people who were working on housing, not knowing about what was happening in childcare, or for people working on housing, knowing what's happening in childcare. Everyone wants to work together, but they didn't have mechanisms. We also learned that in fact, there's another crisis, not just the housing crisis and the childcare crisis on the coast, but there's a crisis of accountability. As we went through the reports, we realized that much of what we were writing in our report, spring of 2021, was written in 2012 in the We Envision report. Warnings that a housing crisis may come, warning that we didn't have enough childcare, that we didn't have food security, and yet some strong visioning about what people wanted the coast to be. Reports were repeated and enriched in 2015 with the progress plan. And then again, detailed good report with the childcare report in the fall of 2019, spring of 2020. And those reports were not acted on. So really what I'm here to ask you today is to look seriously at this report as we develop it, have your input to these final weeks, but let's make something that we can act on, that we can change this crisis of accountability to be one where we create the mechanisms to work together and change the dial. So some of the things that we learned, certainly the regional housing action around the housing crisis meeting, people working together on childcare, some of the needs for transit. I'm not going to go into the specs because we've given you that in the report and the slideshow, but I want to talk about our top 4 recommendations. The recommendation for a social planning table is coming from that notion of fragmentation. And we heard from the community, from service providers, from businesses, Rotary, the credit union, Community Futures, Community Services Society, School District 46, that they need ways to communicate before they submit projects, before they start working in their silos. We also heard full support for social planning from frontline workers. It's one of the first things social workers told us in the fall, in early November. We need a way to communicate across the sectors, and we need a way to get support for each other across the sectors. We heard it from principals, and we heard it from frontline planners in our municipalities. So that's why that sits as our number one priority. We need a mechanism where we can be accountable to each other, regardless of whatever the issue of the day is, regardless of the electoral cycle or changes to senior staffing. We need a community accountability table. The other two fall directly from that. I know your council is super supportive and up to speed on the housing table. We need that housing table. There's craziness that we've been rejected by BC Housing for 2 projects when we have such desperate need to get multiple projects funding. Maybe if we had everyone at the same table and had priority projects, we could get the funding. For childcare, we need a place for that good report to land. Childcare will move to the school districts across the province, and there's going to be some transition. We need a place where there's accountability to the community as that transition happens, because we've got the plan. Now it's going to have a new ministry in terms of implementation. And recommendation 4, we already started with a good communication strategy via our public forums, and we're seeing much more awareness in our community around poverty and what poverty looks like. We're already beginning to address the invisibility, but once again, we need a place where that can follow forward. We're looking for 16, 18, 24 months of a communication strategy that will keep poverty reduction front and center in our communities. It's more complicated when we have multiple governments, but we can do it. And there's certainly a will to work together at this point. In terms of specific actions, we've put in some specifics around you at local government levels, being able to address your bylaws and the policies that might be inhibiting people being able to offer additional housing or being able to offer supports for people living in poverty. And we also need leadership from all our local governments to come together to make sure that these things get initiated. In our project, we're hoping to give you some tools to do that. The document that we included in your package, it's called the Poverty Lens, is meant to be a check to help you understand why your policies and your bylaws need to be amended to help people achieve housing and achieve more food security and income security. We also hope that you will follow through on what we learned from our forums, and that's that the collective vision that came from all 3 public forums was everyone wants to be a champion. We need our entire community to champion addressing these issues. And that's what made us go back to We Envision. Our community had good input into what they wanted, and what they've told us this spring is they want to all champion change in this direction. And the last thing we hope that this project will give you is it will position our municipalities for success for future funding to start to address some of these issues. The Tamarack Institute gave us this quote that I want to share as I conclude. Everyone wants this to be deferred to nonprofits. The provincial funding is not going to come to nonprofits. It's going to come through UBCM to municipalities. So we need to keep our municipalities very close to our solutions, and yet we need those solutions to go across jurisdiction and across service providers so that we're not duplicating our efforts. And that's really the most important part of our message. We've tried to lay out the recommendations as clear as we can. We've tried to give you justification in the document. What you'll find in the final report in about 5 weeks is those will be merged. The stats from the slideshow will be embedded in the document. The recommendations you see and some of the rationale we've explained how we came to them, those will be supported by the stats. So those 2 documents will be the makeup of the final report that's delivered to you in about 5 to 6 weeks. I'll close with that and basically, hopefully take some questions around how we might see this move to a positive place in the near future.
Thank you. Council. Questions? While you're coming up with whatever it is you want to ask, I want to ask about that social planning coordinator. Where do you see that residing? Do you see that residing in government or out of government?
That's the exact question I asked the Tamarack Institute, and there are both models existing. More frequently, it's in government. We're in a unique position because we have multiple governments. Mm-hmm. I think on a temporary basis, it could reside with a nonprofit, but we need to keep our leadership at the elected level very close to that in terms of reporting. So I would hope that we would have a social planning council with a steering committee that included local elected representation, mm-hmm. and that steering committee would oversee a social planning coordinator in a nonprofit, at least for the interim. And Vernon, for example, have kept it a contract position. Nelson, Paul River, several other places have pulled it inside, but all those places are dealing with one municipality, not several. And that's really the conundrum we have here. But I think there's good commitment here to work together, and that we have nonprofits capable of helping us get this off the ground.
Okay. Councillor McLean.
Yeah, thank you. So I appreciate that comment about the accountability. And I think that's where I want to narrow down in the follow-up here. So I'm just trying to think of how we can do better, because obviously the We Envision was a great document, but it's almost 10 years later now, 2012 to 2021. So yeah, looking at progress from there, I think we need to do a lot more. So I guess following up on Mayor Segrest's question about the social planning person, the coordinator, do you see that as the key missing thing in forming this accountability, or is it establishing that table and having everyone together? Like, what did we really miss after We Envision?
To be honest, Matt, I think we missed the table, and we've got some good models. We've seen our Success by 6 early childhood tables start that process. We've certainly seen the seniors planning table, hugely successful, bringing together sometimes 20, 25 organizations to make sure that they know what each other are doing, and they know what the province is doing and how they're responding to that. That's been a big success. So I think the table is what's been missing, because everyone has priorities, and then their priorities get shifted by whatever the crisis of the day comes through. And when there's a table where we all meet together, that's our accountability to each other. So I think had We Envision landed with a social planning table, regardless of who the coordinator was, we would have still had some of that document acted upon. And I see the same thing with the childcare table, to be honest. It needs the table so that people can move it forward in multiple agencies, not just one. And I would hope, I mean, it's a bunch of smart people that have said they want it. And I think that what they're saying is, don't let our organization work alone. We need to talk. Health needs to talk to transit. Transit needs to talk to childcare. Childcare needs to talk to food banks. And we don't have mechanisms. And when we don't have the mechanism, then it becomes an ad hoc, and then we lose the priorities. And I think I'd be willing to make the argument we lose funding because of it. I had one of the VPs at the credit union say to me, maybe if we had all been clear on what our priority housing project was, we would have got Shaw Road, or we would have got the worksite housing, but we went independently, and we weren't successful. And I think that's a big message for us.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Council. I know Councillor Rowe was involved with your group, so she's got a lot of this background information. So what are next steps here with regards to the report? So you're going to go away and come back with the final report?
Yes, we're meeting our advisory council. We've just set it up for next Monday. We want to share with them any feedback you have for us. We also want to look at how we take the stats and merge them with the story, if you like, how many stories to share. We know the powerful stories from our community have really been successful in the communication strategy. So we want to refine that, because the report will have to do both things, both move the public as well as outline the priorities and back it up with some of the data. So that's really, we need to get some feedback on how, and we'll also be planning, how do we want to publicly launch this? And that's a big question in COVID. Publicly launching anything is a bit challenging. We've got till mid to late June to do that. I don't think we're going to be having, quotes, any normal off Zoom launches, but that'll be one of the questions we want to talk to the advisory council about, and how do we make the best bang for the buck? And then I would hope that we can leave it, that we can actually move forward. I think the post-COVID funding may help to get this established, that we can move forward in the fall with both a housing table and a social planning table able to meet together and keep things rolling.
Okay, I know when this grant application was available, at that point, there were grants available for taking on actions that are outlined in the grant. I went online to try and to see if those were still available. I couldn't find them, but I have put a request into the MLA's office, because it would actually fall under our MLA.
Yes. Yeah.
So to find out whether or not those grant applications or grant opportunities are still available. because that would potentially fund this as well. Councillor Rowe?
I was just gonna ask Betty, first of all, well done, ladies. What has been MLA Simon's most recent involvement in this discussion with you guys?
You'd almost think I set you up for that. I sent them a copy of the report. I sent a copy of the report that we were going to be sharing with you. He got the same documents last Tuesday, a week and a bit ago, and he phoned me Thursday evening and we had a half-hour chat. He said he's pleased with the direction we've taken. He did reinforce that the money would likely be via municipalities. And he did say that his priorities at the moment, besides the accessibility legislation, which he's been very busy with, is to meet the goals of the poverty reduction plan. So he's still saying, I'm on this 2018 provincial plan. So basically, I think he would be supportive. I talked about social planning table with him. We didn't get into details at all. And I told him that we were hoping to give him the final report within 5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah, I would agree. I believe a table is the way to go. And I'm really glad that the housing project, that's way too small of a word for it, that Matt sort of lit a fire on, is going in that direction. I've been a part of the seniors planning table, and you're right, it is accountability to each other that keeps things moving forward. So I do absolutely support and think that's the way to go. So I'm glad that you've had some conversation with him and he's on the same page.
I might add, if I can, that we've been keeping his constituency assistant here locally up to speed, because if we send stuff through the ministry, it tends to get a little buried in ministry stuff. So we've been going through his constituency assistant, but we've also been doing the same thing with the MP. The MP's assistant was at the forums, at least 2 of them, and has called a couple of times asking about rural transit issues, asking about housing issues. So they're both well aware of where we're at, and we'll make sure that when we launch and have a final document that they all get it ASAP.
Cool.
Okay, I know that some of the information then that you've been putting out has actually been used to inform budgets. So we're all waiting about the, to see whether or not budgets are approved. If they are, I know that both constituency assistants will be reaching out to let us know how that funding that's available fits with some of the projects and programs that we're looking at moving forward. So thank you for being involved in that. Thank you for the report. We look forward to the final report. And I think this council will look at seeing how we can move something forward. This is critical that we move on this.
Thank you so much for both your time and your support.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for what you've done. I'm going to look to council for a motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you. All right. Thank you, Betty and Pat. Next item on our agenda is our second delegation, and we have a number of people here from the Sunshine Coast Community Forest. We have interim chair Dave King, and Dave, I'll turn it over to you and introduce the rest of your party and take it away.
Thank you, Darnelda. Good afternoon. On behalf of the Board of Directors and staff of the Sunshine Coast Community Forest, we are here to provide the latest draft of our CFOP, our Community Forest Operating Plan. And with me this afternoon to help present that is Kathleen Sudis, who is a board member, as well as Warren Hansen, who is our manager of the forest. And I would like to acknowledge and appreciate living and operating on the unceded homeland of the Sechelt Nation, who we work with in great conjunction. Our object today is to present this and give you an explanation via this presentation of what is a community forest, getting to the yes in forestry and steps to succeed, the environmental inventories involved, community stewardship values and what does it mean, ecosystem management, which is becoming increasingly important. Operations plan, what is it and how will it work? The public review and comment section, which we are embarking on starting today. The map overview of our areas that we function and operate in. Excuse me. Our block tables and how to interpret them, and questions and answers. And to do this, I would ask Kathleen to present the next portion of this. Kathleen?
There we go. Thank you, Your Worship and Council. Thank you very much. As Dave mentioned, my name is Kathleen Suddies. I'm one of the volunteer directors on the Community Forest Board of Directors. The Sunshine Coast Community Forest, we do operate under a mission statement, and that is creating a legacy for our citizens by being exceptional stewards of our forest while balancing the environmental, economic, and social aspirations of the community. A little bit of background, the community forest was established back in 2007. All of our tenure is all Crown land, and it was in fact previously managed by Canfor and Interfor. The sole shareholder or is owned by the District of Sechelt, so local government. And of course, the community forest has a volunteer board of directors, a staff of 2. We engage local contractors and professionals from the community in the course of our operations. All directors are volunteers from our communities, and each bring diverse skills and experience that help the community forest develop strategies as we move forward. Profits are distributed to communities via the Legacy Grant Fund program or through the District of Sechelt. And we are legislated to harvest 20,000 cubic meters per year. The next slide is going to give you a sort of an overview of our tenure area in context to the Sunshine Coast. So you can see from a 5,000 foot level, they're basically named Half Moon Bay, Angus Burnett, or Wilson Creek. I'm going to pass it over to Warren, and he's going to go into some detail with regard to sort of where we're going next with our operations plan. So Warren, over to you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Your Worship and councillors. Yeah, I'm honored to present this plan to you today. But first of all, I wanted to frame our presentation to just kind of step you back into a little thing. So we're getting back to what we do, and we planted this tree, and this tree was planted about a month ago. But this tree will experience 5 generations of our community. It experienced 20 rotations of government and several community forest managers like me. And during this tree's lifetime, humans will place many expectations on this tree, from solving climate change and carbon storage to restoring biodiversity and old growth balance, to supplying jobs in our community and help pay for education, roads, and national debt. And we as humans put so many aspirations on this tree, really, it isn't fair. But with so many values to manage, realistic or unrealistic, forestry managers such as myself, managing community values feel like this poor old Stiphius in Greek mythology. And the story is told that Hades made Stiphius roll a huge boulder endlessly up a hill. The enchanted boulder would roll away from Stiphius before he reached the top, and which ended up consigning him to an eternity of useless efforts and unending frustrations. And we need to move past that. And so we as a community have always changing values and expectations within our forest. I'm born and raised on the Sunshine Coast, actually in Sechelt, and I remember having timber days, logger sports, a whole bunch of different things, and that's what our community was about. And now we have birthdays, we have many other values, and those values extend into our forest. But 3 broad themes that we have for values that we trying to balance is, our wildlife, our environment, wildlife, rare plant communities, and including climate change. Our community has needs, and these are cultural use for the Sechelt nation. We provide legacy funds to our community, as well as we providing jobs and managing recreation and providing access to nature. The provincial government has their own hands out, and they're wanting our stumpage for funding infrastructures, and as well as they provide terms and conditions on which we operate. So, like Stiffia's moving the boulder forward and then having it roll back down, I think that we'll be reaching for an outcome where everyone agrees in forestry and successfully achieving the balance of community values. We think it's going to be frustrating, of course, yes, but it'll be far from useless and pointless. So really finding a balance in our community values, finding a balance of community values is a journey of relationship building, and we all must lend a helping hand to ensure success. And so the community forest is embarking on a new management approach, and really a paradigm shift from primarily an industrial model of maximizing timber extraction and profits to that of understanding our ecosystems, its living things, including our humans, and our interactions within the environment. As stewards of our forests, we have responsibility to ensure our ecosystems, our forests are resilient to the ever-growing concerns of climate change, but acting in the balance and harmony with our community's needs and aspirations. And we feel that ecosystem-based management is the pathway to get us there. So first of all, we need to understand our forest. And so to do so, we need to invest in and complete in ecosystem inventories. And this could be understanding where deer winter range is. We need to make sure that we don't impact our plant communities or species at risk. We look for opportunities where we can enhance wetland restoration projects, and we have a few already being built. And that's for ecosystem resiliency for climate change. Also, too, we're looking for opportunities where we can set aside timber in order to grow or to have it set aside for old growth in the future. Including with that is the social aspect, our community stewardship values, and how our community values are parts of our forests. Of course, they value our old growth. And we provide protection for fish habitat and with buffers called riparian reserves. We also need to protect other species like Marbled murrelet, which is an endangered species, northern goshawk, again, another endangered species. And so as well, going back to old growth recruitment and looking for opportunities to set those aside. Our other community stewardship values, which is something that we can practice, is to make sure that we don't have we defer timber in order to maintain visual qualities. And one of the things that's important from our community is how does our harvesting look from afar? This is a picture from the Lighthouse Pub. And also too, looking for opportunities to provide value from our harvesting. And this is an example of a tree or a bunch of trees that were left to grow to the next rotation to provide future high quality timber products for our next children's generation. And this is called extended rotation. So in this example, not only that we're looking for opportunities to maintain our values, our community values today, we're also making sure that there's community values protected in the future. Again, some more stewardship values. We're managing for recreation, as well as looking for opportunities for mushroom foraging, and making sure that our streams have the highest water quality as possible. Being that we have 3 community watersheds in our tenure, 2 of them are very well highly regarded. It's water quality is of the utmost importance. Lastly, and not least, is making sure that our community has wildfire resiliency, and making sure that that wildfire isn't impacting our communities. So once we understand our ecosystems and ensuring the resiliency from climate change, we understand our community stewardship values. We encapsulate that under something called ecosystem-based management. And then our ecosystem-based management, our community forest operating plan, as you're hearing today, is that document to help make sure that it gets implemented properly. And so we want you to understand that the community forest operating plan is a draft plan, and it's a living document that can be changed to reflect our community's values now and into the future. And Kathleen?
Yep, thank you. So really, what is this operations plan that we're referring to? We actually are very excited about this new community forest operations plan. It has taken some time to get to this point, and we're very grateful to be here. It's a voluntary document. It's not a requirement by any method of legislation. It's a way for us as being a communications process, so we can reach out to community, so we can reach out to yourselves, local government, Sechelt Nation. It's an annual community collaboration. So every year through our AGM or through our public consultation process, we can hopefully solicit feedback from community and have dialogue. Of course, it's presented to local governments, presented to local community associations and recreation groups. It contains maps, a block table, which Warren will describe later in detail, and of course, the actual community forest operations plan document, which again, just to reinforce the fact that at this stage, it's a draft document. So it is us waiting for community feedback and opinion. The sort of the next process with this, of course, is the new concepts that were introduced. And ecosystem management is a really big one, and this is really exciting for us. It also talks about, and we pledge for better public engagement. We talk about variable retention here, biosolid strategies, community stewardship values, old growth recruitment strategy, best management plans and guidelines. And down the road, we're not there yet, but this is where we'd like to head, is looking at carbon offset strategies. So we're very, very proud of these changes, and we hope that you will be with us as well. And the next stage of this, of course, is our public outreach. And there's sort of a cycle, a pattern for how we're going to go about this. So we have our draft operations plan, which is looking at 5 years ahead. Then we do a public release. It goes up onto our website. Then we're able to conduct interviews and individual engagement, present to local government, as we are here, for example, present to community associations, and of course, present to the Sechelt Nation. And that's part of our public outreach. And then we have a life cycle with regard to our time frame of how we go about doing that public outreach. So we have a 60-day window for public comment. This year, April 15th, our plans went up onto the website. Of course, May 13th, we have the virtual open house with presentations and interviews to follow. June 15th, public comment deadline closes. Then we as the board are able to review all of those comments and input, summary of the change to the operations plan, and then with a plan that by June 30th, the board approves the operations plan. So we're feeling very positive about all of this. Part of the operations plan, of course, includes mapping, and with the map overviews, Warren's going to go into detail, but just again, as I look at our 5,000-foot level, our general overview, the black dotted line indicates in context to the coast here where our tenure is located. So that's our total tenure area. The blue patches within those tenure areas indicate the blocks that we're considering for harvest over the next 5 years as part of our operations plan. And then you'll see the area that's in a solid green outline. That indicates BC Timber Sales area in what they call East Wilson or Wilson Creek. And it's currently postponed until the Sechelt land use plan is complete. So that, we can certainly address later on, but that gives you an idea. Warren is going to talk in detail about one of our specific block maps, so he can break it down for you and explain, it's a bit complicated, but it'll give you an idea of all the things that we're looking at and measuring as we move forward. Warren?
Thank you, Kathleen. We have I believe four maps of our operations plan, and I just did a screenshot of one busy part of our plan around the Trout Lake area. This is on our Half Moon operating chart, and to get people oriented, this is the Big Trees Park. The SCRD manages on our behalf. The map includes stewardship areas, and this we're managing for wildlife habitat. There's mushroom foraging that we're planning for, recreational areas around Crowston Lake, as well as old growth recruitment candidates that we're proposing. Once we understand all those community stewardship values, we are able to now put our blocks on the plan, and I'll highlight these areas here in these purple, and those are the blocks that we are proposed to harvest in the next 5 years. So that gives you an idea on that level of detail that comes with the plans and how to interpret them. Our blocks, our plan also includes block tables, and block tables are, they're a pretty complicated beast. There's lots of information in them, and so I'm going to step you through a little bit of that process. Our blocks are named. HM means Half Moon Bay, or Angus, or East Wilson is their operating area, and then the numbers. And then which operating plan that it resides. Sometimes you'll see a block that's been previously referred to, and that's when the year that block appeared on a plan previously distributed from the community forest. And this, our next one is the planned harvest dates and what year that we plan to do it. And usually for the first 1 to 3 years, we have those dates pretty set in stone. And the last column on this slide is block status, and if a block is the first time on the map, then it's proposed, and we're looking for a public review and comments. We call these sort of gates. As a block goes through a gate, there's a level of investment that goes through it. An example is Engineered is a gate that tells the reader that there's ribbon out in the woods, there's been maps, there's some assessments been done, and that it's close to being ready to be put into cutting permit and consultation with the Sechelt Nation. Further, with the table, it shows some locations, and what we try to do is we try to locate the blocks, an example, one of our blocks is located in and around Trout Lake. It's within the Half Moon Bay operating area. So some people get a bit confused that it's if it's not around Half Moon Bay, then they don't have to worry about it. But sometimes location kind of gets the reader to say, "Oh, that's Trout Lake. I need to look at that." And we also list what bioclimatic zone there is, and there's some forestry jargon that Wikipedia can probably help you with, as well as reaching out to me at another time frame, and you can say, "What does a bioclimatic zone mean?" We also talk about age class, and that's an important one to understand. I'm included a table in this presentation just to kind of tell you, that these are just age classes, and they're 20-year age classes until you get to a certain age. But in the example, age class 5, our block is 100 to 120 years old. And nowhere in the plan that you'll see that we have age class 9, and age class 9 is your traditional old growth. And the community forest has a policy of not harvesting any old growth. So that's important. That's an important distinction to remember. And then gross area and then estimated volume as well. So that's it. The draft community plan is a community forest plan is available on our website. If you go to our website, there's a link to their operating plan. Please, by all means, take your time, read through our plan, and also there's a hard copy available at the Seashell and Gibson's libraries. We have a feedback form where you can leave your name and number and just tell us what you think. If there's anything that you have any questions or comments, we can respond back, or you can schedule a further appointment or interview, and that we can discuss the plan in more detail. And yeah, thank you. And we'll lead to any sort of questions and comments. David?
Thank you so much, Warren and Kathleen. As Warren has stated, that our plan is on our website. If you want to review it again and look through it in a little more casual detail. As well, we have a Facebook page that we can be accessed because everybody uses and is comfortable with social media these days, apparently. And so I would open it up then for any questions and comments or concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Council. Questions or comments?
You can unmute. But maybe that's a good thing that we're or possibly not, but as we've stated, though, we are open for any comments or questions or concerns over the coming weeks. This is a draft plan, and we're moving it forward, and we hope to gather as much public opinion and information and input as possible, and questions. Warren is open for and he's the technical expertise on forestry in this group. And so anyway, thank you. And if there's no more questions,
No, we have some questions. Councillor Toth.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you. And not so much questions. I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation. Mayor Seegers and I sit on your board, of course, so we know a lot of everything that's going on. I appreciate that you're doing your best to try and engage with the community, even people who may not be online, copies at the libraries. That's great. I just wanted to emphasize you do have a public presentation that you're doing tomorrow, correct?
That's right.
Yeah, so that's tomorrow at 4 p.m.
At 4 p.m. That's right. Yeah, and the link is on our website. And I'm just looking back at Sarah there. So yes, it is on our website. And please, by all means, communicate to the public that they can click it and join and ask any questions about the plan and our strategy moving forward.
I know that we've received a lot of emails already about 3 particular blocks in the Wilson Creek area. And I know that our staff have been responding with, there is going to be a public information session. Here's the information for you to join if you wanted to share further feedback. So hopefully, yeah, as you say, this is draft. The one thing I did want to make note of is that, 20,000 cubic meters for cut, so 100,000 cubic meters over a 5-year plan. The plan right now in its draft form shows for 140,000 cubic meters. So this is all pre-engineering and pre-community feedback. There is definitely room to look at adjustments in this plan.
That's right. Yeah, it doesn't include our traditional requirements of leaving wildlife, tree retention, other sort of values that we would find in the cut blocks. And traditionally we leave 15 to 20% of that gross area as being, in those sort of retention areas or whatnot. So that's typically what we do, with community forest values and other ecosystem-based management type of initiatives, we may see those gross versus net being a lot, that spread being a lot bigger.
So Alton, if I could just add that the blocks that are in somewhat of a contentious issue currently are 4 years out in our plan. They're not for another 4 years. And also too, our plan has to be mobile and fluid, because we're also in very waiting with encouragement for the Sechelt Nation land plan, that is land use plan that is coming forward, that may affect various methods of our operation and how we are cut. But we are in continuous dialogue with the Sechelt Nation, and they approve every block and every cut and every tree virtually that is cut in our tenure.
Councillor Rowe.
Oh, thanks. I was just actually going to mention the session tomorrow. So thank you, Councillor Toth. Just thanks for the presentation. And I really appreciate within it the highlighting of all the different values that are considered. And I think that really is made clear the way that you've presented it in a way I haven't understood before. So being that, my knowledge level around forestry is pretty minimal, I think you did a great job there. And I think the community can have a much better understanding, and hopefully you'll get some feedback. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for presenting this. I like the direction Community Forest is moving in, and I like that you're engaging with the community. So really appreciate you reaching out. As Councillor Rowe indicated, most of us around this table aren't foresters. We don't know much about that. The way you presented it makes it easy to understand. And I see that you are responding to community values. So I look forward to seeing what the final plan looks like once everybody's had their say and we've incorporated that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity today to present to council, and tomorrow if you'd like to join in and listen, it would be for the general public and all concerning parties to join us tomorrow.
Thank you. I think a few of us may be showing up in your attendee list.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you
so
very
much.
much.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. Bye now.
You bet. Bye-bye. All right, so council, I'd look for a motion to receive this report. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. So moving on, we have item 5.1. This is the COVID-19 Safe Restart Fund grant policy. I'd look for a motion to receive the report. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And over to Ms. Smith.
Thank you. Before you is a proposed council policy for a COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant Program. Staff created this policy in response to council's direction for staff to create a community grant program that would use some of the funds from our municipal COVID-19 Safe Restart funds. In researching options for this policy, staff reviewed similar grant policies from other municipalities in BC, and we based our guidelines on those guidelines and definitions established by the province of BC. If this policy is approved by council at their next meeting of May 19th, staff could have information and application forms available to the public as early as May 25th. So that's right after the May long weekend. And applicants would then be given approximately 4 weeks to submit an application. All applications will then be brought forward by staff to a committee of the whole meeting in July for assessment and recommendations. And if the funds are not exhausted in that first intake, a second intake could be offered in the fall. Although staff are recommending a budget of $50,000 with a limit of $5,000 for each grant, the committee may choose to allocate a different amount of funding towards this grant program and amend the attached policy before final adoption by council. If you have any questions or comments, happy to answer those.
Thank you very much. Council? Councilor McLean.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is overall, it's a great program. I think it's going to address a lot of the concerns that some of the not-for-profits have with operating in COVID times. And it's really going to provide some good funds to programs that support vulnerable people. So overall picture, I think, is a good one. I'd just like to see one thing changed within the grant, and that's item 4, the maximum grant amount. So I think the $5,000 limit is good for the majority of projects. However, I think there may be a couple projects out there that are of higher concern. So one that I think has been discussed a little bit is obviously the poverty reduction plan just presented. They may need some support. There may be other programs. There's some work within the housing group and getting some rental incentives programming going. And I think this is a great funding source for that. So I'd really like to see an option to have an increased, a few grants that are increased above the $5,000. So to that end, I'd like to see the limit be increased from 500,000 to 10 or 50,000 to 10,000. Let's try that again. 50,000 to 100,000. There we go. That's the numbers. And then 4.2, I'd like to move a motion that 4.2 be amended to add except as written, except for projects that address an issue of paramount community concern as determined by council. So these are to solve our largest issues. I think we can go above that $5,000 limit is the intent of the motion.
Okay, so there actually isn't a motion on the floor right now. So if we were to go back to page 16, where the recommendations are, what you would like to see is that recommendation 2, we allocate 100,000 rather than the 50,000 as presented. And that in number 3, we recommend that we adopt the policy with a revision to, that would be then 4.1 and 4.2. So 4.1 would change the amount. 4.2 would change basically the allocation piece.
Yes, that's good procedure. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is there someone who would like to second the recommendation that's been put forward? The recommendations, 2 of them have been put forward. I'll second it for discussion. Okay, it's on the floor. Council. Councillor Toth.
Thank you. I'm not sure that I support the higher limits, the higher values. I think the key for this program is to provide sort of, I mean, we're setting the program now, but I think my internal thoughts on this program was to provide smaller grants of assistance to organizations who need something right now. I wasn't anticipating us trying to use this money to solve the Sunshine Coast's problems, either singularly or collectively. I do like the way that the Gibson's model seems to have been working. Yeah, so I'm a little, if we have other projects that come along that might warrant bigger funding, I think we should look at those projects individually. I don't know that we should try and shoehorn them into a small grant program like this.
All right. Councillor McLean.
So I recognize that comment, but I'm trying to proceed in the most transparent way possible. I think by including an option for larger grants, it puts it out there that we're willing to consider providing some further funds. So yes, I have a couple in my mind, but by putting this out publicly, we can see what the community comes forward, and then this council can make a fair decision to balance the needs of some of these larger projects at the same time, rather than just doing them on a one-off basis.
All right. One of the things that I had staff look at actually when this was coming forward is I went back to the CIP meeting right, I had them go back and say, inside the community investment program meeting, I know there were some recommendations made by that committee. And one of them was for a grant of $10,000 through the COVID restart funds for the impacts of COVID on Arrowhead, right? Because they have to hire additional staff for this period to manage people coming in and out. So the 5,000 limit wouldn't work for that inside of that program. So I saw that as one of them. Another one that will probably be coming forward is a request for some funding to support the housing initiative on the coast. And then we have the poverty reduction ask that will be coming forward at some point in the future as well. So how would we, I mean, I get both of your points, right? Councillor Toth and Councillor McLean. How would we deal with those types of requests if we limit this one to 5,000? And at what point do we say, okay, that's it, we're not doing this anymore? Because I know we have internally as well considerations about space. We're doing some work next week, I believe, already on some of our staffing spaces, because currently the way we're set up, we can't bring staff back safely. There's also we may need additional space, and we're looking at Seaside Center. So we have some considerations on that. The other is technology. How do we deal with technology? Because personally, I don't see the meetings going fully back to in person. We might have some kind of hybrid model. How do we deal with the technology and pay for that? That all is under COVID as well. So at what point, like if we put this in place, at what point do we say, okay, that's it, no more? Because we have to be able to operate as well, because that was one of the big criterias in providing the funding. Director Douglas, did you want to speak to this, or are you just listening yet?
Still listening a little bit, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Todd.
Thank you. I actually have a question. You referenced Arrowhead there specifically, which is under the umbrella of community services. The federal government also announced all sorts of initiatives for nonprofit organizations, and I'm wondering if something like Arrowhead qualified for the federal assistance. There was so many different programs coming through in so many different forms and times and characteristics that I didn't really track that. But you know, if Arrowhead needed $10,000 or $15,000 to hire some additional staff because of COVID concerns, I would have expected they would be eligible under the federal programs that were available. Is that not the case?
They probably were. And I don't think any organization, any government expected this to go as long as it has. So yes, there was some funding provided, and yes, community services received some of that. I think Community Foundation, Sunshine Coast Foundation, what they're called, Sunshine Coast Foundation has also provided some of that funding and gathered funding from the community. It's just the impacts are ongoing. And so the funding that's been provided, I don't believe has met the need of the organizations. All right, anybody else want to weigh in on this one? Director Douglas.
Thank you, Your Worship. To the amendment to 4.2, if we were to go with an amendment, I think it would need to be a little bit more refined, so people would out there would know what kind of projects council would see as being, more worthy of a larger value than 5,000, because it could, we may miss somebody who has actually a project that would be considered without a definition there, or somebody may not apply because they don't know that's a council high priority initiative. So, if we were to amend that wording, I would like to see some definition just so that people will actually be attracted to come forward.
Okay. I don't know if we're ready for that. All right, one point, and then I'll go to Councilor McLean. So this is a recommendation to council. So what we passed today is not actually approved and enforced. It will be coming back to council. So we could potentially have some time between now and when it comes to council to look at the wording and revise the wording. Is that correct? All right. I'm going to go to Ms. Smith and then go to Councilor McLean.
Thank you. I did just want to point out that since writing this draft policy, there was a change made with Arrow in regards to Arrowhead Society and Sunshine Coast Community Services, so that now fundraising and grant applications for Arrowhead Society are done through community services. You will note that in the draft policy here, under item 3.1, applicant organizations may only submit one application, which means that if an organization such as Community Services felt that they had multiple programs under their umbrella that were in need of funding, they would be limited to one application for any of those programs.
All right. Councilor McLean.
Yeah, so to Director Douglas's point, the best response I have is show me what you got. Let's see what the community has to offer. And the approach I like here is that it outlines what we are allowed to spend COVID money on, because what we are allowed to spend is the same criteria that is for the grant. And the short version of that is support for vulnerable people. So you have to fit in that box regardless. And if we put in a process that's outside of this grant, it's less clear of how you can fit into that box. We're only providing an exemption on the amount. It still has to meet all the other criteria. So I think that's a good process. To Ms. Smith's comment about community services, when we look at support for vulnerable people, they're clear leaders in this community. They have many, many programs. And if we want to support vulnerable people, it's likely through community services. So perhaps we can have a conversation about 3.1, the one application for funding, because community services does do so much and have so many disparate programs.
Director Douglas.
Yeah, I was just going to make comment that that is only one of the factors that somebody would get money for, would be vulnerable. If an organization found that they were short on revenues, would be another stream that they could get funding under.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to the recommendations. So right now there are two recommendations on the floor. The first one is that we allocate 100,000 of the COVID Safe Restart funds to a grant program for local not-for-profit and charitable organizations. I'm going to, these are all been moved and seconded, but I'm going to have a vote on them separately because I think we can make a change to the second one that would allow it to move forward and be refined between now and the council meeting. So recommendation 2 reads that the committee recommend that council allocate 100,000 of the COVID-19 Safe Restart Fund for local governments to a grant program for local not-for-profit and charitable organizations. Is there anyone who would like to speak to that first before we take a vote on that? All right, all those in favor? Thank you. Okay, so that is passed. So then the last one on the floor right now is that the committee recommend that council adopt the policy for nonprofits and charities as amended in 4.1 and 4.2. I think what we're looking at is that, how do we put this? That the committee recommend that council consider adopting the policy 2.5.7 COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant for nonprofits and charities with amendments to be brought forward to the council meeting for items 3.1, 4.1, and 4.2. And that gives, Councillor McLean, Councillor Toth, Ms. Smith, and a few of us to kind of weigh in on to Director Douglas's point, what can set the box in such a way that people in the community know that they'll fit or not, but they're also maybe potentially not limited to the $5,000, depending on what their project is that they're coming forward with. Councillor Toth. Director Douglas, but Councillor Toth.
And then we got SCRD tomorrow. Yeah.
Yes.
The 3.1, I don't like the idea of changing 3.1 at all. You figure out your priority project, submit your funding application for your priority project. You could get one organization submitting 10 proposals for $10,000 each, and they're all critically important, and we just shoveled $100,000 out the door to one organization. And I don't think that's fair to anybody who might be putting in an application. So I think by doing the one, you put in your priority application. If we don't hand out all the money, $100,000 is a lot more money than $50,000. If we don't hand out all the money, we do a second intake. Perhaps then at the second intake, they can submit another application.
Okay. Any other comments? Ms. Smith.
I'm wondering if committee may wish to suggest which of the items that are listed under the eligible expenses, which is section 2 of the policy, are priorities for District of Sechelt. I'm wondering if that's if that might be helpful if we are going to be changing item 4.2 in the policy.
Ms. Frank.
Your worship, hearing the motion that's on the floor, first of all, I note that we're pretty well through already setting the council agenda for the May 19th meeting. So there's, by the time staff pulls together the report based on council's direction here today, there's a good chance it would only come forward to the first regular council meeting in June.
Okay.
Council a little more time to think about it. And we could take the notes, the minutes from today could reflect the discussion, and it could come back to council in June rather than next meeting. More time to think about it.
Okay. Council? What would you like to do? Councillor Toth.
I'd actually rather we have another kick at this can in 2 weeks' time in the next committee of the whole. And that way we can have as complete a discussion as we want around what we want to do with the policy. And then when it comes to council the next week, it's ready to be adopted. That'd be my preference.
Okay. Councillor McLean.
Yeah, I think I can support that, Councillor Toth. I think it comes down to item 2.1. Organizations that provide food, care, shelter, social, and support activities for the necessities of life. That is still a pretty big topic. So it probably needs more narrowing down. My interest personally is obviously in housing, but I think there's big need at the food bank as well.
All right, Councillor Toth, would you like to make a recommendation that this get deferred to the next committee of the whole meeting?
Sure, I'll make that recommendation.
Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Seconded. All right, so no further discussion. All those in favor? Thank you. I guess we get to do some more thinking about this before it comes back to the next meeting. Thank
Thank you.
All right. You've done a great job in putting this together. Right. It's very complete. And I think it's just we're trying to get a handle on where we see the need in the community and how we want to support that inside of what you've got here. So thank you very much for that.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion to adjourn, please. Moved and seconded. All in favor?